Hey, so I had done a demo of StyleGAN yesterday in class, but I wasn't really happy with it, so I'm going to re-record it now. Um, Basically, the process for this is pretty similar to the demo that I linked to that's already on YouTube. But for certain reasons, I want to show it again this way, just to sort of get you up and running from scratch. So you already have all the code that you need installed on your Paperspace machine. What I'm going to talk through is like how to actually get your data set up to StyleGAN, convert it to the right format it needs to be converted to, and then start training. And this actually is pretty quick. The hardest step you'll find is actually like the time you have to wait to upload everything to Paperspace, which I've already done here, so I'm cheating a little bit, but I'll show you how this works. So first off, when you have an FTP in Paperspace, you're going to use the same credentials you already used to SSH into your machine. So you use the username is Paperspace, the address or URL you're looking for is the public IP address, and your password is what's already been sent to you. So once you enter that into either Transmit, CyberDuck, any FTP application, you'll then click Connect. That will show you what your desktop basically looks like. In here you'll see that there's a folder called StyleGAN. You're going to go into there. You probably will not have an images folder, so what I recommend you do is actually create a folder called images. And there you're going to want to upload your cleaned up data set. So remember that for StyleGAN, all the images need to be square and they should be 1024 by 1024. So once you've done that, I recommend uploading that folder to your Paperspace machine. So in here I've got maybe 1,000 1024 by 1024 images. Just quickly open one of these and show you. That's what it looks like. Once you've got them up there, what you need to do is you actually need to convert them to a new file format. So the file format that StyleGAN requires is what it's called TFRecords. So if you ever lost here, one of the things you can do is if you just go to GitHub and you type in StyleGAN, we're working from my version, so if you go to this URL, you'll be able to find it. So in here, when you scroll down at the bottom of the page, you'll see that there is some instructions here on how to use a pretrained network. There's also an example here of, this is not the right place. It's here. So preparing data sets for training. This is basically how you go about making your own data set. So in here, you'll see there's a line of code here called dataset tool. It's important to remember this is different than the dataset tools GitHub repo that I have. But basically, this is what you want to use to create a new dataset. So the line we're going to use is actually this one. It's called create from images. So there's some other lines here that will help you create sort of default pre-built datasets. But what we really want to do is we want to create one from scratch from our own network. So you're going to want to log into your StyleGAN network, into Paperspace. So here, when you log in, you'll probably be at the root directory. So if you type in ls, you'll see here are all of your images that you need, here are all the networks and models that are available to you. So you want to get into StyleGAN. So you're going to type in cd StyleGAN. Now we're inside of the StyleGAN repository, so if I hit ls again, you'll see here a bunch of the anything that's in green is a file that we can run. Anything that is bluish purple is a folder. So in here you'll see here's my images folder. This is everything that I already want to work for them. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this command. So it's python dataset_tool.py, create from images. So let's start with that. Now the way this works is this is the data set we're going to create, and then here are the images that we want to create it from. This is important to remember the order of operations here. So I'm going to take data sets. I'm going to add a space back in here. And then I have to give this a name. So I happen to know that these are a bunch of images from Blade Runner, so I'm just going to call it that. Then hit space. Now I want to point it at the directory. So the easiest thing for me to do, because I use transmit, is to come over here and just grab this folder. And if I hit Command C and then come back to terminal and hit Command Paste, it's just going to put in that entire URL that I need for that thing. So if this is set up correctly, I should be able to just hit Enter, and it's going to start working. So let's see what happens. Cool, so I got a bunch of sort of messages that we can sort of ignore. Basically, some of this stuff is about TensorFlow, which is what's working. What's important now is now I've got a number and it's starting to increment. So it's going to start making, so there's 1,500 images or so in that folder. So now it's basically telling me that it's going through them and creating them. Rather than have us wait for the 20 minutes it's going to take for me to do this, I'm going to quickly show you what this is going to create in another folder. So I'm going to stop this by hitting Control-C. I'm actually going to jump over to another server now, just because, again, I've sort of set this up to be able to quickly demo it. If I go to this other server, which has a little bit less in here, but we still have a StyleGAN folder, and I go in here, and then I go to Datasets. Here's a dataset called Blade Runner. When I go inside of it, you'll see there are now there's 9 files in here, and it's important to know what these files represent. So each of these represents a different scale of image sizes. So the way StyleGAN works is it works by progressively changing the size of every image. So it starts at 4 pixels, then it moves to 8 pixels, then it moves to 16 pixels, and then it scales up further and further. So what you're actually looking at here are the different sizes. So 2 to the second power is 4, 2 to the third power is 8, and then 2 to the 10th power is 1024. So this is the 1024 file. It's really important to notice how big this file is. So this happens to be on a bigger data set. This is, I think, 5,000 images, maybe a little bit more, but it's a really large file. So I was actually yesterday telling people to do this conversion on your local hard drive, like on your laptop. But I actually found, for a number of reasons, that it's probably better just to upload your data set to Paperspace and then do the conversion there, in part because it's easier to generate an 18 gigabyte file on your hard drive or on Paperspace than it would be to actually upload that. So depending on how big of a data set you have, this could be 5 gigabytes, it could be 25 gigabytes. So I really recommend, even though despite me saying otherwise yesterday, to do this on Paperspace. It's just going to be a little bit easier for you because you don't have to transfer these huge files over. So once you have this file here, what you actually need to do is you actually want to start running it. So I'm going to show you the next thing to do, which is how do we actually move this into, how do we actually edit a file and how do we have it run. So when you open the StyleGAN folder again, you're going to see here that there's a file called train.py. Now, really you only need to edit one line in here, and I'm going to tell you exactly what to edit. So if you're worried about, like, I don't know how to write code, I don't know what I'm going to do, I'm going to walk you through it. So the first thing you want to do is you want to open this file. There's a couple ways you could do this. If you're in Transmit, you can just go to Open With. Actually, you could do to Edit in Transmit. Let's see if this works. Yeah, so you can actually open this directly in Edit in Transmit. If you have another FTP application, you could download it. You'll have to open it in what's called a text editor, something that allows you to edit code. That could be, I recommend Sublime Text because it's pretty easy to download. In fact, you can just go over here. You can just do a Google search for Sublime Text. And this, you can download this for free. So you can just download it to your hard drive, and once you open a file in it, you can just edit it. It's pretty straightforward. It's like a text editor. It's like Word or something, but it's a little bit better for code. So you could edit this, so again, like you could edit this in Transmit, or you could say Open With. And what I recommend doing is opening it directly in Sublime Text. That's what I'm going to do. It'll help just to sort of see what's color-coded in here. So you're going to open this file. It's going to look like a lot of gobbledygook unless you know how to read code. And even if you do know how to read code, this might be a little bit over the top for you. Either way. The line you want to look for is what should be in your folder, line 37. This says description, and that says plus equal, and then it's got a bunch of stuff here. So this is set up to run on the networks that StyleGAN is already built for, which is a thing called FFHQ. All we're going to do is we're going to edit this to be for us. So the first thing you want to do is you want to rename this line here, and you should match this to whatever your name of your folder is. So my folder happened to be named Blade Runner. Yours might be a different name. Make sure that this matches just so that you know what it is. Likewise, what you want to do is you want to take this name and you want to use the same file folder name here. So this is actually what's really important. You could change the name of this and it would be okay, but this name has to match the folder name. So in my case, this is inside of datasets. it's the folder called Blade Runner, and it's the folder that references all of these files, right? So it's looking for this name so it can match this pattern. So make sure that those match. If they don't match, it's going to throw an error. The last thing I'll mention here, and you can probably leave this on, is that StyleGAN trains images that are flipped or mirrored to each other as a way to help sort of learn a little bit additional material for training. So in the case of something like a face, it's fine if a face is mirrored left to right. If you were somehow training this on something like, let's say, text, you would want to set this to false because you don't want StyleGAN to be trained on letters that are backwards. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. For realism's sake, you wouldn't want it to. So in this case, I'm going to leave this on because it doesn't actually matter if it's flipped left or right for me. So this is literally everything you need to touch on this file. Everything else is set up for you. You're going to hit save. And you're going to see, okay, now we're back. It said upload complete. What you can do now is you can go to your paperspace folder, and you can now say, the command you want to type is you want to type nohup, N-O-H-U-P, train.py. So, or sorry, actually you need to also type Python. So nohup python train.py. So you're probably familiar with what python.trainpy means. That basically says, hey, in Python, I want to run this file. And that's the file we edited, train.py. What you might not know about is what nohup is. So nohup is basically, it stands for no heads up display. Basically the way that paperspace works is that when you run this command that just says python train.py, that's going to start running. However, if you break your connection to your paperspace server, let's say you close this window or you close your laptop, this command is going to stop running. So with StyleGAN, it can take a couple days for you to train everything. So actually running this is going to take you a little bit of time. So no heads up display basically says, hey, keep running this in the background and don't break my connection. Now the other thing that you're gonna have to know about that is when you hit enter to actually run this command, you're not gonna get any display, right? You're gonna get this command that says nohup ignoring input and appending output to nohup.out. So what does that mean? It basically means that you're not going to know what's going on inside the network unless you check this file. So when you go back to your server and you refresh this page, you're now going to see there's a file called nohup.out. The other thing is that it's kind of funky that you actually, like, it won't automatically know to open it with Sublime Text or with anything. So you might have to download it and then open it in the file, in the whatever you want to read it in. If you have transmit, you can just say edit and transmit. And then this is what a lot of the commands will look like. So in this case, I didn't actually finish my training. Or I didn't finish creating all those TFRecord files. So this happened to throw an error. But for you, what'll happen is you'll get a command, you'll get a bunch of stuff here that looks like TensorFlow code, and then it'll say start training. So what you'll want to do is every 5 or 6 hours, you want to come back here and make sure that there's not been a new error that's been thrown, but that you keep seeing stuff training. And I'll show you another way to make sure that it is still training. But in the meantime, like, this is a file you can look at if you think something's going wrong. But most times it'll probably be fine as long as you don't disconnect paperspace. So now that I've got this running, essentially, obviously this version isn't running, but another version is. So what I can do over here, I'm just going to jump into this other server and sort of show you what the output looks like. So while this is running, you will get a new folder called results. And when you open that folder, you'll see that there's a name here that happens to correspond, at least this line right here should correspond with the name of your folder. So when you go back here, whatever you named here should match here. So I'm going to name this Blade Runner 1024 when I was running it, but basically it should match. And then inside that folder, you should see a bunch of images starting to be created. So you'll see a thing called Reels. This is a good way to, you should always double check this to make sure that these are the images you've uploaded. This will basically create a grid of images, and you'll be able to see all the images that you've loaded into your data set. So make sure this matches what you would expect it to. You'll then also start to see a bunch of PNG files that are called fakes. So this is actually what StyleGAN is producing. This is its way of checking to make sure that it's producing fake images. So you can come on here and you can open these. So in Transmit, you can just click on a file and you can hit the space bar, and that's going to open it. You'll see, because these are pretty big files, it's going to take a little bit of time to load this. It's basically downloading a copy so you can view it. So this is starting to look like something. It's a little blurry right now. It's pretty messy. All of these start at 7,000, which I'll talk about in a second. But basically, like, you want this to run, and it's going to run every 30 ticks is what it's called, and it's going to output a new image. I would say you're probably not going to be ready to use this until about 10,000. So you want this to run for a little bit, and you'll see each one of these takes about an hour to produce, and that's pretty normal. On a Paperspace machine, it might be a little bit faster. This happens to be a slower machine that I use, but it will run for quite a while. So it's going to take a little bit of time. What I recommend doing is every couple hours you come back to your FTP application, you open it, and then just open these files and make sure that what you're seeing is what you would expect. Another thing that's good to keep in mind is that let's say this is the latest file. If I look at the info on it, I'll see that it was created at 10:51. I'm recording this at 11 o'clock, so this feels about right. If this were to say 7 p.m. and this was the last file, and it's been 4 hours since a file was produced, I'd be a little worried about that, and I might go back into nohup and check out what's going on there to see if I got an error message. But in general, each of these will generate maybe every hour or so, and that's just as it trains. The other thing you'll notice in here are what's called .pkl files. Those are called pickle files. These are really important. This is actually what we're going to take and bring into Runway so that we can actually produce the animations. So it's really important that you don't delete these files. Generally what I'll do is, as I'm generating images, I'll just check to see how an image is looking. This one's like good, but it's probably going to be better than this version, which, yep, is looking pretty bad. So I might, depending on how much space I have on my Paperspace server, I might clean some of this up by just deleting some of these. So the thing is, you never want to delete your latest version. Like, make sure you keep that. That's always like the latest or newest pickle file. Make sure you always keep that. In case something breaks, we can train from this old version again, and that's going to save us a lot of time. But you can always delete old versions if you're like, I think the newest one is the best so far, and it's worth just keeping it. So I'm just going to delete this, just as a way of pruning up my folders. So you've now got these pickle files. Again, I would keep an eye on this. I would check on it every couple hours. I would check to see how my fakes are doing. If, say, around 8,000 or 9,000, you're starting to feel like, oh, I'm seeing some pretty good images, you might want to stop training. And the way to stop training on one of these nohup machines is to type something in called NVIDIA SMI. Okay, so this is installed. So what we'll actually need to do is you'll need to do apt install. Oh, actually, I just spelled it wrong. That's what happened. So it says here NVIDIA SMI. So we're actually just going to take this. Now, because I don't have anything running here, you're not going to see anything. But if something were running, you would see here that there would be a process that was a usage. That would be pretty high, and it would say Python. And I would actually take this command. I've got this in some other demos, which I'll direct you to. But basically, you would just take this, and you would say kill all -9, and then you would enter in this ID. So I might do this. I'm not actually going to do this because this might crash something that is already running in my process. But basically, this is a simple way to just stop that running. And then you can go back and you can start to download those files. So if I were to have something that I thought was pretty good, I would actually just drag this and download this to my hard drive. And then I've got another demo which I'll point you to that takes all of the content, or takes the pickle file, loads it into Runway, and then you can do animations and other things from it. So that's pretty much the gist of StyleGAN. That's the demo of just how to run it. One thing I want to talk about is, why does this number start at 7,000? So in the previous demo that I ran this and it started at 0. And what that's called is training from scratch. The reason that is not what I currently recommend doing is it just takes a while. So we're now at a place where Well, basically, when you train from scratch, it would take 3 to 4 days to get you up to 7,000 ticks, and that is a lot of money, right? So, like, let's say it was 4 days times 24 times 0.78. It's $75 worth of training time on Paperspace. You should save yourself that. So what this actually does, this is a thing called transfer learning, and I won't get too far into what transfer learning is, but the metaphor that I use is let's say that I asked you to write a sentence in English, right? Let's just say, write me a sentence in English. You could write a sentence in English, right? What's interesting about that is, like, I got the sentence in English from you, but in order to actually write that sentence, you had to learn, like, all about the English language, right? And something happens similar with StyleGAN, right? So we're training from this model that is all faces. But in order to learn how to make a face using this machine learning model, it probably had to learn a lot of other stuff, right? It had to learn what a face doesn't look like. And it might have learned, like, some other techniques about, like, how to generate images that look realistic. So essentially what we're telling this StyleGAN model to do is say, hey, take all the stuff you've already learned and then relearn some additional stuff using the data set I give you, right? Let me give you some content that is not just faces, and you look at it and you tell me what you think about it. And then you try to generate fakes from that. So that's why this very first version here looks like mush, because it's basically taking that image, that face data, and then it's actually, like, taking all the other images I give it and kind of mushing it together. But you'll see as we go through this one's starting to look a little bit better. It's still pretty mushy. This one's getting even better. Like, we're starting to see some definition here. And if I go all the way up to here, which I've only been training for this for a couple hours, we're starting to see actual differences in the way that things are shaped. So this is actually really important. Like, it's a pretty cool technique in that it saves us some money and it also helps us train stuff faster. So this is just something, if you ever hear someone talk about transfer learning, that's essentially what this is. But it's a really helpful technique and it's going to save us some time and some money. So that's about it for this demo on StyleGAN. I recommend that I'll link to the video. I recommend you watch the full StyleGAN demo video. And it's going to include all the parts where we download these files, we bring them into Runway, and we do the technique of doing some animation in P5.js. So that's all for this session. Like I said, I'll link out to some other materials, but if you have some other questions, feel free to ask me in class or drop a note in the YouTube video. Thanks.